What's happening right now in Taybeh, Israel is horrifying. Okay, I've been following this story for about a month now, and it is really weird, really bad. You guys need to be aware of this if you haven't heard of this yet. So armed Israeli settlers have been storming a very peaceful Christian village, Taibbe, torching homes, destroying property, even setting fire to religious sacred sites like Christian sites. And if that weren't bad enough, there have been new attacks just yesterday. We're going to walk through toward the end of this video. I'm going to give you those details. But first, you need to know just how bad it's gotten. If you've never heard of this place, let's just look at a map. All right, so Taybeh is located north of Jerusalem. It's in Palestine, and that's going to be really important. So you can see on this very detailed map, it's kind of pixelated, but this is the best that I could pull up in a short amount of time. So Taybeh, located in the northern part of Israel, north of the Dead Sea, north of Jerusalem. Let's turn now to the Vatican News website. They've been detailing these attacks. Some of the major ones happened toward the end of June. Let's just start walking through some of these articles so you guys can be aware of what's happening over in Taybeh. So wave of settler violence targets Palestinian Christian village. Over the past month, residents of the Palestinian village of Taybeh, the last entirely Christian village in the West Bank, say they have come under repeated attack. On the night of June 25th, fires were lit near the village entrance. A few weeks later, a fire broke out next to the ruins of a 5th century church of St. George. 5th century. Residents and clergy blamed the fires on Israeli settlers, a claim supported by footage available online. Much of that footage was collected and shared by Ibn Hassan, a Palestinian Christian activist originally from the West Bank. Let's get into the attacks themselves. Hassan, who grew up in a nearby Ramallah, told Vatican News that Taybeh is a small village of about 1,300 people. Not too many. Violent attacks by settlers in the region are not new, he said, and in fact, around 10 families have already left the village because of them. And this is their goal. They want to drive out Christians in this town. Christians, right, from Israeli settlers. Recently, Hassan said the violence has escalated and there have been constant daily attacks on the villages surrounding Taybeh. A month later, on June 25th, settlers attacked the village of Kafr Malik in a raid that left 3 Palestinians dead. Footage posted by Hassan suggests that they then moved on to attack Taybeh, which is nearby, setting vehicles on fire near the village entrance. In a number of subsequent attacks, settlers herded a cattle to graze on property belonging to residents of the village, according to residents and clergy. Why? Why are they doing this? We're going to talk about that. They literally invaded the backyards of these people, emphasized Hassan. A fire was also lit near the graveyard attached to the ruins of the 5th century church of St. George. As we mentioned earlier, footage shared by Hassan suggests that settlers were responsible. We're going to talk about this image on the screen in just a minute. Taybeh, the most peaceful, quiet town. Hassan noted that violence by Israeli settlers is sometimes justified, however unfairly, on the basis that it is a response to Palestinian aggression. In the case of Taybeh, he stressed, it is impossible to make such an excuse. The Christian village of Taybeh is really the most peaceful, quiet town in the entire area. He said these are peaceful, lovely people. On 14th of July, a delegation of Christian leaders, including the Latin and Greek Orthodox patriarchs of Jerusalem, made a visit to Taybeh to condemn the violence. They were accompanied by a group of diplomats, among them representatives from France, Belgium, and Italy. Let's actually dig more into the story of these Christian delegates, these Christian leaders, Latin and Greek Orthodox patriarchs. Let's talk about them for a little bit more. So a plea from Taybeh. Following weeks of settler attacks on the last entirely Christian village in Palestine, the vicar of the custody of the Holy Land, Father Abraham Faltas, makes an impassioned plea for peace. In Arabic, Taybeh means good, but lately nothing good has been happening in this Palestinian village entirely inhabited by Christians. On Monday, July 14, the heads of the Christian churches of the Holy Land, together with ambassadors and consuls, came to express their closeness and solidarity with the residents and clergy of Taybeh, who for weeks have been facing severe attacks by hundreds of Israeli settlers. These settlers are violently trying to seize their homes and lands. Taybeh has around 1,500 residents, all belonging to different Christian denominations, Latin, Greek Orthodox, and Melkite. Yesterday morning, everyone was there, religious leaders, residents, and even people from neighboring villages, grateful for the fraternal support from those who truly understand their suffering. As you approach Taybeh from the north of Jerusalem, the village presents a familiar and welcoming sight. The bell towers of 3 churches rise above the landscape. watching over a peaceful and united community. And from the voices of these people, adults, elders, and children, you could hear their fear, their pain, and the tension of the past weeks. There have even been deaths in the area. Many have been injured. People have been forced from their homes. Buildings have been demolished. Fields set on fire. These are cowardly attacks against unarmed civilians, unarmed Christians, people who for hundreds of years have remained faithful to the religion of their ancestors in a land that still holds the tradition of Jesus' time. And yet, not a single word of hatred or revenge has been spoken in true Christian fashion. Only a heartfelt plea for help to be allowed to live in peace on their land. Christian leaders, including Father Falta, seated third from the right, gather in Taybeh. You can also see Cardinal Pizzaballa here on the left here. The Holy Land is suffering in each of its inhabitants, in each piece of desecrated land, in the violence that continues to wound it. In Gaza, the massacre goes on. People die while waiting in line, humiliated just for asking for food. Children die simply for approaching sister water, a source of life and comfort for all. In the West Bank, particularly in Bethlehem, daily life is becoming unbearable. Local Christians are being forced to leave their homeland in search of safety and work abroad. They long to remain in their homes to preserve their identity as a people of faith, but the constant harassment and unrelenting settler attacks carried out with impunity, along with ever-tightening restrictions on movement, make that impossible. Again, these are Christians. Israeli settlers are attacking Christians. The recent massacre at the Church of Damascus and what's happening in Taybeh in the West Bank don't mean that what was happening is a religious war. Yes, it's heartbreaking to see holy sites violated and desecrated by violence, but above all, we must defend and protect the lives of innocent, defenseless human beings. And I think we all have to be on board with that. We all have to be on board with that. The seriousness of what is happening in the Holy Land is well documented. The images and reports of are both shocking and infuriating. We had all hoped that the recent international meetings would bring an end to the absurdity of this situation, but nothing has come of them. Nothing has come of this meeting. Other religious leaders that went to Taybeh. International bodies seem powerless to stop the rising death tolls, only managing to underscore the failure of our shared humanity. The global community lacks the responsibility needed, too often swayed by self-interest and hypocrisy. This is horrible stuff. Peace negotiations swing between hope and disappointment. Those calling for a ceasefire must do so with integrity and urgency, truly aiming to stop the violence, to prevent more from suffering for those who have already endured far too much. Let hunger and thirst come to an end. Let go of the aim to confine an entire people to a small corner of their own land. Taybeh means good in Arabic, and from the last entirely Christian village comes a message just as good. Unity and peace for all people of the Holy Land. Christians, now a minority in the land of Christ, have carried forward the promises of the Redeemer who over 2,000 years Taybeh has not withdrawn. It remains open, welcoming, and united in the hope of peaceful coexistence in the land of the Prince of Peace. Now, this article was written before the recent attacks that happened, again, just yesterday. Let's turn to those right now. So there's been a new attack on the West Bank in the Christian village of Taybeh. The Christian village of Taybeh in the West Bank was once again targeted by extremist Israeli settlers in a nighttime attack, despite recent high-level visits meant to deter such violence. They don't care. They do not care that religious leaders are coming and expressing unity and peace and trying to get these to stop. They don't care. Local leaders are calling for impartial investigations as official responses have failed to hold perpetrators accountable, drawing concern from international diplomats and moderate Israeli voices. Despite the recent visits of the heads of Christian churches on July 14, followed by that of U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, violence against the Palestinian Christian village of Taybeh has continued unabated. The only entirely Christian Palestinian village in the region was once again the target of an attack during the night between Sunday 27 July and Monday. The attack at around 2:20 a.m., a group of settlers broke into the village, reportedly throwing stones at homes, attempting to set one house on fire, scrawling threatening messages in Hebrew on walls and torching 3 vehicles, including one belonging to a journalist and another to a municipal council member. When young Palestinians emerged to protect their homes, livestock, and families, the attackers fled. like cowards. Israeli soldiers tasked with protecting civilians arrived more than an hour later. So this is also really important. This is not from sort of internal Israeli government or anything like that. The government is not the one, at least seemingly, who is in charge of all of these things. These repeated assaults carried out by a group of settlers identifying themselves as the Hilltop Youth and led by extremist religious figure Neria Ben Pazi had previously targeted farmland and livestock. So this person, Neria Ben Pazi, we'll talk more about him later. Violence increasingly targeted at people. Now, the violence is increasingly aimed directly at people. Though the attackers were fueled by religious fanaticism, their actions are not exclusively anti-Christian. Rather, they are a part of a broader campaign against the Palestinian population, affecting nearby Muslim communities as well. The intent appears to be the gradual displacement of Palestinians from their land, Christians among them, given that the majority of Christian communities in the Holy Land are Palestinian. A recent Israeli report had controversially exonerated the settlers, even suggesting they had assisted the villagers in extinguishing the fires, though it remains unclear who allegedly started them. Last night's attack also seems to bear the mark of retaliation against the U.S. administration, whose representatives recently issued strong condemnations of settler aggression. German Ambassador Stefan Taybeh remarked, "Whether the target is a Christian village or a Muslim community, these extremist settlers may claim divine mandate, but in truth, they are criminals, strangers to any authentic faith." And here you can see one of the cars that was set on fire during these recent attacks. Christian witness of peace. What makes these attacks particularly grievous is the peaceful witness of the small Christian communities in the occupied West Bank. These communities have consistently refrained from responding with violence, even when faced with provocation and attacks carried out in full view and often on the silent watch of Israeli military forces. Their call remains clear for a fair and independent investigation into these incidents, one conducted by neutral third parties, not by those directly or indirectly implicated in the violence. The findings presented thus far by Israeli authorities have raised concern even among moderate voices within Israeli society. Taybeh is one of the last remaining all-Christian villages in the West Bank, and right now it is under attack. Homes are being torched, sacred places are being desecrated, families are being terrorized and driven from their homes. If we care about religious freedom, if we care about human dignity, we cannot look away from this, guys. Fortunately, there are ways that we can help. You can start by contacting the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, which oversees the Christian communities in the area. They're on the ground and connected with the people directly affected. You can also reach out to organizations like Catholic Relief Services, Open Doors, or In Defense of Christians, who work to support persecuted Christians across the world. But finally, and this is probably the most important thing you need to do, we need to spread the word about this. Share this video like wildfire. Tell people what's happening, because silence only empowers the attackers. Christians in the Holy Land are crying out for our help, for your help. Let's be the ones who answer.